The judge barely finishes reading her name when it happens. The entire courtroom rises to their feet, not because they're told to, not because of any legal protocol. They rise because they know who she is, and more importantly, what she's capable of. Lady Celeste Banks, a name whispered with reverence and fear in equal measure. Draped in a tailored black dress and a sharp gold brooch bearing the insignia of her private foundation, she walks with the silent command of someone who knows she owns the space. Even here, in a courtroom designed to break the spirits of the proud, she walks like a monarch reclaiming her throne. But who is she? To the world, Lady Celeste is a billionaire philanthropist, a titan of real estate, and the woman who reshaped the legal funding system in America. To her enemies, she's a dangerous manipulator, one who moves through boardrooms and courtrooms with equal mastery, playing a game only she understands. And now, she's the defendant in the most sensational trial of the decade. From a young age, Celeste knew the odds were never in her favor. The daughter of a single mother who cleaned homes in Atlanta, she grew up watching the wealthy pass by with eyes that never saw her. That invisibility hardened her. By 14, she was already flipping small properties. By 23, she had her first million, but it wasn't enough. Not for her. She didn't just want wealth, she wanted presence, to be seen, to be unignorable. Now she's achieved it all. Billionaire status, global influence, and a presence so commanding that even hardened lawyers and lifelong judges can't help but acknowledge her when she enters a room. But today, something is different. Her eyes aren't gleaming with triumph. They're cold, focused. She's not here to celebrate a victory. She's here to deliver a reckoning. The prosecution claims she illegally influenced over a dozen federal court decisions by funneling funds into obscure judicial campaigns and leveraging political alliances. The evidence? Sparse, circumstantial. A few encrypted messages, suspicious donations, shadowy ties to shell companies. But Celeste isn't worried. She has something far more powerful than a defense. She has the truth, and it's far more scandalous than any accusation. As she takes her seat, every camera in the courtroom zooms in. Her face remains unreadable. The judge, a veteran of over 30 years, hesitates, not because of guilt, but because he too knows this isn't going to be a normal trial. Celeste leans into the microphone. "Your Honor, before I plead, I request to make a statement." There's a pause, then a nod. She stands. "In this courtroom, I am accused of manipulating justice, of corrupting a system that was already corrupted long before I ever had the power to challenge it. But if I'm to be judged, then I demand that all the truths be heard, not just the ones convenient for those in power." A hush falls. Even the air feels tense. She places a leather folder on the table. This contains everything, every name, every transaction, every time this very institution bent the rules, not for me, but for those who thought they'd never be caught. The judge leans forward. The prosecutor shifts uncomfortably. Celeste's voice remains calm. "You want a trial? Let's have one. But understand, I'm not the only one on trial anymore." Suddenly, the narrative flips. She's not here to defend herself. She's here to expose, to bring into light decades of silent agreements and hidden favors that have shaped the lives of millions without their knowledge. She's the mirror held up to the system, and the reflection is terrifying. Her team of attorneys, once quiet, begin distributing copies of the file to the court. Names of public figures, details of judicial lobbying, cross-referenced accounts. It's not just evidence, it's ammunition. The courtroom is no longer in control. She is. This is no longer a trial about one woman's guilt. It's the unraveling of an empire of deception, And Lady Celeste Banks is the architect of its collapse, and so the world watches, some in admiration, others in dread, but all with one question burning in their minds. Before she commanded courtrooms and headlines, before the scandals and secrets, Celeste Banks was just a girl with nothing but rage and brilliance in her bones. Her rise wasn't a fairy tale. It was a calculated, ruthless journey through a world that refused to see her until it couldn't ignore her anymore. Celeste was born in the sweltering heart of Atlanta, in a crumbling apartment shared with 5 relatives. Her mother, Lorraine, cleaned offices by night and cared for Celeste by day. Her father, a name never spoken, a ghost never pursued. From the start, life taught her one rule: survival wasn't given. It had to be taken. At age 10, she was already a strategist. While other children played, she read legal documents she found in the trash of the firm where her mother worked. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood power. The way those papers dictated lives, evictions, mergers, indictments. She saw that justice wasn't blind, it was owned. By 15, she'd hacked her school system to redirect scholarship funds to a new foundation, one she created anonymously to cover her tuition. She got caught. The principal expelled her, but a local attorney, impressed by her audacity, offered her an internship instead of punishment. That man would later become a senator, and Celeste never forgot his name or his secrets. By 20, she had brokered her first real estate deal. A condemned block turned into luxury condos, with just enough political pressure and legal gray areas to scare off competitors. She made enemies. She also made headlines. The girl who came from nothing was now something, and she liked the view from the top. But the higher she climbed, the more dangerous her allies became. She entered elite circles, financiers, lobbyists, tech moguls. They admired her intellect, but never truly accepted her. They invited her to their tables, but only so they could study her, maybe control her. They failed. Celeste studied them back, and she learned names, habits, weaknesses. She turned every insult into leverage. Every door slammed in her face became an opening somewhere else, and then came the Banks Foundation, her masterpiece. Publicly, it was a philanthropic organization for justice reform. Privately, it was her information network. Through community outreach, she gathered stories of judicial abuse, economic sabotage, and systemic corruption. She built databases. She tracked judges. She tracked donors. She built power, not just in wealth, but in knowledge. By the time she was 35, she had enough dirt on enough people to either become untouchable or a target. She chose to become both. Celeste never sought public office. That would have made her predictable. Instead, she pulled strings from behind the curtain. Mayors owed her favors. Judges consulted her off the record. Corporate giants feared quiet mentions of her name in regulatory hearings. But with influence came shadows, quiet threats, anonymous letters, leaked stories. Still, she never faltered until one of her closest allies turned on her, a whistleblower, a former confidant. Someone who once owed their career to her generosity, now waving sealed documents in front of federal prosecutors. It wasn't betrayal that stung Celeste. It was inefficiency. She had trusted too easily, and now the past she had weaponized was being used against her. But what no one expected, not the prosecutors, not the journalists, not even her enemies, was that Celeste had already planned for this. Years ago, everything that was being exposed, she had planted it herself, pieces of information designed to trigger an investigation on her terms. Because while the world thought it was putting her on trial, she was opening the gates to what she had spent years preparing for. The courtroom wasn't her downfall. It was her stage, and the air in the courtroom had shifted, not just with tension, that was expected, but with something more dangerous: anticipation. Lady Celeste Banks wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was setting the room and the nation on edge. Every breath, every glance, every delay felt calculated. And then she dropped the first name. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "let the record show. I call for the subpoena of Judge Malcolm Greer." A gasp echoed through the chamber. Greer wasn't just a judge, he was a legend. 40 years on, the bench. A man painted as incorruptible, untouchable, above reproach. But to Celeste, he was the first domino. The one who once taught her that justice could be bought because she had seen him sell it. Years ago, during her foundation's early days, she received a letter from a young man on death row. His case had been tried by Judge Greer. The evidence? Flawed. The witnesses? Paid. The verdict? Swift. Celeste had investigated quietly, then shelved the file. At the time, it wasn't useful. Now, it was her opening move. She turned to the jury. In 2009, Judge Greer presided over the case of Elijah Wren, a man who still sits on death row for a crime committed by someone else, someone the judge had ties to through offshore trusts. Gasps turned to murmurs. The judge, overseeing her case, tried to silence the room, but the tremors had already begun. Celeste opened a folder. Inside, copies of wire transfers, handwritten letters, and audio recordings. Judge Greer ruled in favor of prosecution while receiving quarterly deposits into a shell company located in the Cayman Islands, she continued. "These documents confirm it. I will submit them to the court now." She handed the evidence to her legal team, who delivered it to the bench. The courtroom went dead silent as the judge sifted through pages that, if verified, could unravel decades of decisions. But Celeste wasn't finished. "This is not personal vengeance," she said. "It is systemic correction. For every time justice was twisted by the powerful for the benefit of the few." The media outside exploded with breaking alerts. "Lady Celeste exposes judicial corruption," one Chiron read. "Judge Malcolm Greer under fire," another. Meanwhile, Celeste remained composed, almost cold. This wasn't about emotions. It was execution. Her legal team moved swiftly. Motions were filed to delay further proceedings until Greer's response. The judge, visibly shaken, agreed. Court was adjourned, but the spectacle was only just beginning. That night, as news anchors dissected every second of her statement, an old photo surfaced. Celeste and Greer at a gala 15 years prior. She was a rising businesswoman then, he already a pillar of law. The photo sparked questions. How long had she known? Why wait until now? The answer was simple: leverage. Celeste had learned early that timing wasn't just about opportunity. It was about control. Releasing information too soon would have made her a target. Too late, irrelevant. But now, in the heat of a trial where her character was in question, perfect. The public reaction was instant. Protests formed outside the courthouse, some supporting Celeste, others calling for her imprisonment. For the first time in years, America was united in one thing: shock. But while the world debated her morality, Celeste was already 5 moves ahead. She knew that exposing Greer was only the beginning. Her enemies had counted on her being cornered. Instead, she turned the courtroom into a battleground. And now, they were scrambling to figure out what she'd reveal next. Because the truth was this: she wasn't attacking individuals. She was burning down the illusion. The justice system wasn't broken. It was designed to function this way, and Lady Celeste had spent her life studying its gears, its cracks, its unspoken deals. Now, with every revelation, she wasn't just exposing the corruption. She was rewriting the rules of who got to speak in court. As the courthouse emptied that evening, her security escorted her to a black car. Journalists shouted questions. Supporters cheered, protesters screamed, but Celeste, ever poised, simply looked out the window. This wasn't about redemption. It wasn't about revenge, it was about control. And for the first time, those who had built the system on secrecy were learning what it felt like to be publicly dismantled. The morning after the courtroom erupted, the city no longer felt the same. The marble walls of the courthouse, once symbols of order, now radiated uncertainty. Lady Celeste Banks had detonated the first bomb, and the tremors were only beginning to spread. Across the country, newsrooms went into overdrive. Every outlet, from legacy networks to underground forums, dissected her words, her tone, her evidence. Some called her a hero, others a manipulator. But no one could ignore her anymore. She was no longer just a figure of wealth. She was a reckoning. By noon, Judge Malcolm Greer had resigned for health reasons. His public statement was brief, his face absent, but insiders knew the man had been given a choice: walk away silently or face humiliation on a global stage. Celeste had made sure of that. Her documents were airtight, her strategy surgical. But the fall of Greer wasn't the end. It was a signal. Behind closed doors, panic erupted in circles that once mocked her name. Politicians reviewed old connections. CEOs called emergency meetings. Foundations scrubbed donation trails. Anyone who had once dismissed her as a social climber with a grudge now understood. She had always been watching. Meanwhile, protests outside the courthouse doubled in size. Two factions clashed: the Justice for All movement that hailed Celeste as a liberator, and the Save the System coalition that painted her as a dangerous anarchist. Inside the courthouse, though, something even more alarming was happening. Clerks found anonymous letters slipped under doors, old case files with discrepancies. Defense attorneys began receiving encrypted emails pointing to judicial conflicts of interest. It was as if the entire system had begun to leak from within, inspired by one woman's defiance. Celeste knew exactly what she was doing. She understood human nature, how shame and fear triggered silence, but outrage triggered action. By striking a public figure like Greer, she had activated hundreds of quiet observers. People who had seen injustice, endured it, but never had the voice or power to speak. Now they did, or at least they believed they did. And belief, Celeste knew, was the most dangerous fuel of all. Back in her penthouse, high above the noise, Celeste reviewed the next phase. Her legal team had tripled. Her private analysts tracked social sentiment, political reactions, financial shifts. Every movement was data, every rumor a potential weapon. She had become less a person and more a force, but she wasn't reckless. Every step had purpose. As night fell, she released a video statement. Simple backdrop, no music, no theatrics, just her voice. "I did not come to tear down justice," she said. "I came to confront the lie pretending to be justice. For years, I've watched our system protect the powerful and devour the defenseless. I have no interest in becoming a martyr. I'm not asking for your admiration. I'm asking for your attention. Because the names I carry are not secrets anymore. They're history waiting to be corrected." It went viral instantly. By midnight, former prosecutors began stepping down. Activists launched lawsuits. International media picked up the storm. What began as a single court case was rapidly evolving into a national crisis of legitimacy. And Celeste? She was calm. Because all of this, was the plan. She hadn't revealed everything yet, not even close. Greer was just one of many. The next targets were higher, wealthier, more protected. But they weren't invincible. Not anymore. What the world didn't know was that Celeste had spent years infiltrating the very institutions that now feared her. She didn't just have files, she had allies, whistleblowers, former interns, quiet janitors and overlooked assistants, people who remembered everything, people no one had ever thought to fear, until now. The courtroom was still, officially, her battleground, but the real war was unfolding elsewhere. in boardrooms, in secret government committees, in the encrypted servers of tech empires. She was no longer striking in plain sight. She was shaking the empire. For a moment it seemed the world had paused, holding its breath in awe of Lady Celeste's audacity. But power, when threatened, doesn't retreat. It retaliates. And the retaliation came fast, coordinated, and brutal. It began subtly. A respected news anchor opened the evening segment with an unbiased investigation into Celeste's financial empire. Graphs, ominous music, hints of embezzlement. No proof, just enough insinuation to stir doubt. Hours later, bots flooded social media, with hashtags calling her a fraud, a narcissist, a puppet of foreign interests. But Celeste had expected the smear campaign. What she didn't expect was the betrayal. At 3:42 a.m., her lead security advisor, a man who had protected her for over a decade, vanished. His apartment was stripped clean, his bank accounts frozen, a message left on her encrypted line. "Your shield is gone." It was more than intimidation. It was declaration. The elites she had shaken were now united. Old rivals became allies. Political enemies joined hands. They didn't want justice. They wanted her erased, not imprisoned, not discredited, erased, forgotten. A name no one dared mention, a memory that faded into fear, and yet she didn't flinch. Because Celeste had anticipated even this, every move against her was already factored into the calculus of her plan. Her life wasn't just guarded by muscle and money. It was armored with truth, and the truth, once out, couldn't be unspoken. But even truth has enemies. The next day, 3 of her foundation's satellite offices were raided. Agents claimed they were searching for financial irregularities. What they took, however, weren't ledgers. They took people, whistleblowers, researchers, voices, silencing them with handcuffs and threats. Celeste watched the news from her penthouse. Her hands didn't tremble, but inside, something turned cold. She knew that she was running out of safe ground. Her legal team, once composed of confident warriors, now spoke in whispers. "We might need to settle," one of them suggested. "Delay the rest of the disclosures. Buy time." "No," Celeste replied. "We don't buy time. We reshape it." Her next move was risky, but necessary. She called a private meeting, not with her lawyers, not with her board, but with the only people who had nothing left to lose: survivors, victims of wrongful convictions, families destroyed by judicial negligence, journalists fired for investigating powerful donors, teachers blacklisted for exposing corruption in public institutions. They came quietly, cloaked in fear, eyes wary. But when Celeste showed them the files, names, dates, proof, something shifted. They no longer felt alone. She wasn't building a case anymore. She was building a movement. The next morning, a video leaked, not from her team, from an anonymous source. It showed a backdoor meeting between high-ranking officials and a media mogul, planning a containment narrative for Celeste. The audio was damning. Words like neutralize and strategic leak echoed like war drums. It spread like wildfire. Now even those who once doubted her started to hesitate. News anchors stuttered, senators deflected questions. The empire had struck back, but its mask had slipped. Celeste seized the moment. She filed an emergency motion in federal court, demanding protection for her witnesses and the release of detained employees. Alongside it, she submitted a new list of names. Bigger ones, political figures, corporate icons, judges still on the bench. The court had no choice but to respond. Hearings were scheduled. A special commission was proposed. Public pressure mounted. Celeste was no longer just a defendant. She was the catalyst of national unrest, but with momentum came risk. One evening, as she returned to her penthouse, her car's brakes failed. Only quick reflexes saved her. The investigation, inconclusive. But the message was loud. They were done. playing games. Her inner circle urged her to flee. Go underground. You can still run this remotely. Celeste refused. I didn't start this in the shadows, she said. I won't end it there. Instead, she took the next step. She went live. On a global broadcast streamed across multiple platforms, Celeste stood alone before the world. No podium, no legal jargon. They are afraid, she said. Not of me, but of what I represent. A system where no one is above scrutiny, where power answers to truth. They can smear me, threaten me, even try to end me. But they cannot unlearn what I've shown you. They cannot bury what you now see. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to, because the storm had already begun. And she was its eye. By the end of the third week, it was no longer just Celeste Banks against the system. It was a movement, a fracture spreading through the spine of national authority. And no matter how hard the elite tried to stitch the cracks, the public kept pulling the seams wider. The headlines had changed, no longer speculative, no longer defensive. Now they asked questions no one had dared before. How long has the system been compromised? Was Lady Celeste the only one watching? What if she's right? In cities across the country, people gathered in front of courthouses, capitals, and media towers. Some waved signs with Celeste's face, stylized like a revolutionary icon. Others chanted the names of the judges and officials she had exposed, even in places that once ignored her: rural towns, financial hubs, academic circles. The tide was shifting. Celeste had become more than a person. She was now a concept, but that didn't mean she was safe. She moved with triple security. Communications were encrypted at multiple layers. Still, attempts to breach her networks came daily. Drone surveillance, deepfake videos, leaked confessions that were easily debunked, but not before they seeded doubt in those desperate for normalcy. Yet for every attack, her support grew, because the people didn't want perfect, they wanted real. And Celeste was undeniably real. She didn't hide her past. She spoke openly of her early manipulations, her strategic silence, her use of leverage. Yes, she told one interviewer, I've used the system's flaws to survive. The difference is, now I'm using them to expose the truth. That honesty disarmed even her critics. She began appearing on underground media outlets, bypassing traditional networks that refused to air her full statements. Independent journalists followed her like shadowed guardians, documenting everything, uploading in real time, ensuring no edit could rewrite her narrative. And then, the government made its boldest move yet. An emergency session of Congress was convened to propose new legislation, one that would expand the authority of intelligence agencies to combat coordinated misinformation campaigns. The language was vague. The timing wasn't. It was a message: we're coming. Celeste responded before they could even vote. She released the echo file. No one knew the full contents at first, only that it included over 200 hours of recordings, 3 terabytes of documents, and dozens of legal memos tracing corruption across 4 administrations. The data was decentralized, released to journalists, universities, foreign media. Even if her team was raided, the truth was now immune. The file became legend. Overnight, Echo wasn't just information, it was the system laid bare. Judges pressured into verdicts, politicians traded for votes, CEOs with back-channel deals that made mockeries of regulation. The damage was irreversible. The proposed legislation, dead on arrival. But even victory came with cost. Celeste's home was firebombed. No one was hurt thanks to advanced security, but it was a clear escalation. Someone wanted to reset the game by removing the player. Still, she didn't stop. She relocated to a secured facility beneath her foundation's headquarters. From there, she continued her broadcast, her filings, her work. But more than that, she began training others, not lawyers, not influencers, organizers. She gathered people from across industries, ethics professors, hackers, activists, ex-cops, even repentant lobbyists, and taught them what she knew. Not just facts, but tactics. How to hold power accountable, how to navigate bureaucracy, how to survive when the system turns hostile. She wasn't just leading a movement anymore. She was multiplying it. And then came the international call. A panel of global legal scholars nominated her for the Liberty Prize, an award reserved for those who expand the boundaries of justice under extraordinary risk. She didn't celebrate. Instead, she used the moment to pivot the spotlight. "I accept this recognition," she said, "not for me, but for every voice buried under decades of procedural indifference. Justice is not a statue. It's a fight, and I intend to win." The audience, global now, listened in silence. Celeste Banks was no longer being discussed in whispers. She was being written into history, and history, she knew, had only just begun to take notes. It was scheduled for 8 p.m., prime time. The broadcast had been teased for days, not by media, but by whispers, leaks, and a single image released by Celeste's team, a chessboard missing its king. No one knew what she would reveal, only that it would be final, irreversible, the kind of truth that doesn't just wound, it dismantles. By the time the stream went live, over 80 million viewers had tuned in across platforms. Schools paused classes, bars went silent. In the heart of Washington, D.C., digital billboards displayed her name in black and gold, and then, without warning, the screen flickered, and Celeste appeared. No dramatic music, no preamble, just her, seated before a single light, holding a thin folder. "I warned them," she said softly. "I begged them. I offered a quiet resolution. But arrogance is louder than wisdom. And now the silence they forced on so many ends here." She opened the folder. Inside was a name, one that no one expected. Senator Alton Vexley, the architect of national security reforms, former judge, decorated war veteran, revered by the public, idolized by the powerful, untouchable, until now, Celeste presented her case not with fury, but with surgical precision. She outlined a 20-year pattern of abuse, campaign funds funneled from private defense contractors in exchange for favorable legislation, court cases suppressed, whistleblowers erased, a personal fortune quadrupled through off-the-record influence, documents, emails, flight logs, surveillance footage, bank statements. Then came the voice recording. It wasn't new. It had been captured years prior during a private fundraiser. But tonight, its release was a blade to the heart of trust. Vexley's voice: "We don't need oversight, we need control. If a few rules break along the way, that's the cost of holding the leash." The fallout was instant. The broadcast was mirrored across platforms, downloaded by viewers, re-uploaded to clouds, drives, torrents. Even attempts to censor it only multiplied its reach. It could not be buried. It had become digital scripture. Within hours, protests erupted, not just outside courthouses, but inside military bases, law schools, corporate campuses. What once was Celeste's battle had become a nation's outrage. And in the capital, something unprecedented happened. Senator Vexley was detained. The Department of Justice, under crushing public pressure and international scrutiny, had no choice. A special counsel was appointed, his assets frozen, his staff subpoenaed. The man who once walked untouchable through the corridors of power now stood behind reinforced glass, awaiting judgment. But even as the country roared, Celeste did not celebrate. Instead, she retreated. Not in fear, but in necessity. The threat had changed. This wasn't about evidence anymore. It was about control of narrative. Her image was no longer hers. It was a battlefield. Her words twisted, her motives questioned. Some called her a savior, others a usurper. And so she did something unexpected. She went silent. For 7 days, no statements, no videos, no leaks, just stillness. And during that stillness, the world turned on itself. News anchors debated her disappearance. Conspiracy theorists filled the void with fiction. Political leaders scrambled to realign allegiances. And ordinary people, those who had followed her journey, believed in her, began to feel something deeper than admiration. They began to feel responsibility. Communities organized, legal clinics formed, old case files were reopened, new candidates emerged, ones who promised transparency, not perfection. Her silence had become a mirror, forcing others to speak. And on the 8th day she returned, not with revelations, but with a question. "Now that you know," she said, "what will you do?" It wasn't a challenge, it was a handoff. The fall of Vexley had proven that the powerful could be held accountable. But Celeste never intended to stop at punishment. She wanted transformation, and transformation she knew had to come from within. She closed her final statement with a whisper. "I am not the voice of justice, you are. I am simply the reminder that it still exists, if you're willing to fight for it." The screen went dark. No outro, no signature, just silence, and the roar of a nation waking up. Sim, Sim.